Welcome, everybody. This is our March 28th speaker. We've got our bug user group meeting here with Sam, Enmark, and some other querying folks, Carrie Rentz and Garrett here. So welcome to them. We're going to probably get some stragglers come in here just because a lot of times classes end at 7. So just keep that in mind. That we'll have some people coming in. Those of you that are from my 170 class, yes, if you could put your name in the chat, that would be great, and what class you're with. And if you're uncomfortable asking any questions, feel free to put those in the chat and we'll field those questions as we go along. So I just want to welcome Sam here. Sam just got a new position here at Querying, and so Sam just moved up to be a pre-construction manager. He's been working out at the Valley Children's Hospital. And so I'm going to turn it over to Sam just to maybe briefly introduce himself, and then we'll get Garrett and Carrie to introduce themselves here too.
Yeah, thank you, Christy. Good evening, everybody. So as Christy said, my name is Sam Enmark. I have been with Querying now for about 6 years. In pretty much all that time, I've been kind of on the field side, being project engineer, assistant project manager, project manager. So I've been kind of out in the field that whole time, and then have recently made the transition over to pre-construction. It's still yet to take. They keep sending me back out into the field, so that's kind of I'm in between right now. But we'll eventually be back in the office with Garrett and doing kind of a pre-construction role. So really seeing projects from kind of nothing from an owner coming to us saying like, hey, we want to do this, and then kind of seeing that all the way through to, hey, we've got full drawings. Here you go, construction team, go handle it. So that's kind of my role right now. And I guess with that, I'll kind of pass it over to Garrett if you want to take the next stab at introduction.
Sure, yeah. My name's Garrett from Melfort. I'm an estimator with Query in General. I've been there for going on 7 years now, so a little bit of time. But yeah, basically my job is to make Sam and Carrie's life as hard as I can. But no, I'm kidding. No, trying to make it as easy as possible. But yeah, that's what I do.
Thanks, Garrett. Carrie, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. For those of you that don't know who I am, I'm Carrie Rentz. I'm a senior project manager now. Actually, I think I've been with Querying for almost, I don't know, 8, 9 years. I don't know. I kind of lost track.
Stop counting.
It keeps going. I'm pretty much always field-based. Mostly in the past couple years, I've been focused more on our public works side. More prevailing wage, skilled trained workforce, anything we have to do with public works projects, as we're branching out to that. And Garrett doesn't make our life totally miserable, but I try to send him feedback so that way he gets better at it. So just like all of us. So, but no, I haven't had a chance to work with Sam directly, but I also like to call him our Bluebeam Ninja. Because he actually helps train a lot of us in the office on Bluebeam as well. So I think we're in for a real treat today. So, yeah.
And Carrie, how much longer are you down in Bakersfield?
Oh boy, if it keeps raining, next year. But yeah. At this rate, it's pretty close to Christmas time. I'm hoping to get my Christmas gift early and get out of here a little sooner.
So you have lots of weather delays, huh?
Yeah, pretty much. It's the fact that they all happen on Tuesdays through Thursdays really makes life very difficult. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's not good.
We're like this close to getting dried in, and it just doesn't want to give up. So,
just as we think it's going to get dry, there's just a little bit more rain. It just keeps on giving.
Yeah, that's terrible out there.
I almost need a crane to pick up my crane for the steel so I can put it in the right spot at this point.
So it doesn't get stuck in the mud.
Yeah, exactly.
It looks like we have a Nathan Newman. Nathan, welcome to our bug user group.
Good evening.
Hi.
What's going on, Nathan? Hey, Sam. How are you? Good. All right. So, Christy, Nathan is the, oh gosh, Nathan, I'm going to screw up your title, Executive Director of Construction.
Oh,
Got it.
wow.
All right, out at Valley Children's Hospital. So the projects we're going to talk about tonight, Nathan has been heavily involved with. And it's awesome that he's on the phone, because I really kind of in the logistics wanted to focus a little bit more on ownership and kind of how it impacts them, and how really a lot of these logistics plans are to coordinate with owners. So Nathan, thank you for calling in.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. Thanks, Sam. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And thanks for coming, Nathan. We're really happy you're here. We rarely get owners coming in, so the students can hear a different side of things. So welcome.
Yeah, thank
Okay,
you.
so
Appreciate it.
oh, go ahead, Nathan.
No, you're fine. Sorry.
Thanks, Nathan. So let's go ahead and segue into the actual bug user group meeting. And so Sam, there was a couple things maybe before we get into Valley Children's that I wanted maybe you to just share with the students. Maybe you could tell them like what a pre-construction manager does, and also a little bit about querying and maybe the career opportunities that are in querying. We've got a couple people, one person at least here, that is actually going to be working for querying after they graduate. Keith's going to go work for querying. So
Only if he gets that gold medal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Keith is up for the Dean's Medalist, so it's pretty special. So I don't think in I don't think we've in construction had a Dean's Medalist in the college for like 16 years. Isn't that what they said, Keith?
Wow.
Yeah, that's what Robin said. I don't know.
It's been a long time, so
Yeah, hopefully I'm the first one.
yeah.
No pressure
that's awesome.
at all, by the way.
Yeah, so maybe Sam, you could, since querying does do a lot of recruiting from this group and other places, you could tell us a little bit about how to get involved in querying.
Yeah, so let's I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna start sharing screen here.
Sure.
And I promise I will talk about all those things. I think the order that I've got it in, and I think I'm sharing the wrong screen. Are you guys able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, the blue beam.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. All right, so I'll start by just kind of giving you guys a little bit about querying and kind of who we are. And then go over kind of careers, and I'll talk a little bit about kind of the difference in roles, I think probably between Garrett, Carrie, and myself, and kind of the different career paths you can have within querying, and I think in a lot of different construction companies. And then kind of just go over a quick overview of logistics and kind of how we use logistics plans. And then really get into kind of some of the specifics as far as hospital, and then I'll go over kind of HCI/OSHPOD logistics and planning, and kind of with that start to go over some of the Bluebeam tips and tricks and how we utilize Bluebeam in order to create these logistics plans. So with that, who we are. So we're a general contracting company, started in 1947 by our founder, Ben Queering. Since then, it's been handed off to his two sons, Greg and Paul, who were owners when probably Garrett, Carrie, and myself all started. And since then, the company has then been handed off to kind of a leadership team that we have here. So we're technically third generation at this point, but it's really kind of the first generation outside of the Queering family that is taking ownership of it. So hopefully Nathan's not going to disagree with anything that I'm saying here, but I feel like we're very client-centric. It's a lot of times what's best for the client is obviously what we're going to be trying to do. And in doing so, we like to do so with a collaborative approach. And for us, that collaborative approach is not just with the client, but it's with all of our trade partners. It's with everybody within Queering. So really kind of like to get in early and kind of take that collaborative approach to make it a successful job. Just kind of some metrics, 80% of our business comes from return clients. So while we are kind of dipping our toe a little bit into some public works, we try more so than not to get our work from return clients. And that means that we've got to do the job right the first time, and then kind of keep them coming back. Projects that we focus on, we're kind of across the board a little bit. You're not going to see us yet, I say yet, doing a $150 million job. We kind of, right now, our zone that we're kind of really kind of comfortable and happy in, and can kind of knock them out of the park, is that kind of $30 to $40 million range. We will obviously do, I mean, I've got a contract right now for $125,000. And then we go up to the kind of that $100 million plus range. And ground up renovations, kind of small and large, whatever's needed. And again, kind of one of our focuses, and you'll kind of see in these next slides, is going to be that healthcare. So anything from acute care to clinics and labs, oncology, ORs, pharmacy, kind of across the board. So with that, I'll just kind of highlight some of our big market sectors. And I got a list of all of our jobs that we've got going today, and probably 9 of them out of like the 13 or 14 that we got going right now are all healthcare. So we definitely focus in healthcare. I find it's a passion of mine, and I think that's shared across a lot of people within this company. It's a challenging build most of the times, and we'll kind of discuss about why it's a challenging build. And if you see, I'm circling this HKI OshPod over here. It definitely adds some complexity to the projects that we're doing. But at the end of the day, kind of seeing patients utilize it and get better in the buildings that we're building makes it all worth it. So that's really where a lot of our time is spent. I'd say kind of the competing sector right now for us is going to be kind of senior living and multifamily / affordable housing. Senior living is kind of where we've seen a lot of work in the past, and then multifamily affordable housing is where we're seeing a lot of work right now. So a recent graduate that just signed on, well, I don't know when he signed on. It seems like he's been here forever now, but Jaime just went from the Valley Children's Project and is now working on a pretty large multifamily affordable housing project.
Hey, Sam.
So yeah.
You know, I'm curious about the senior living type projects, because in Fresno, there's not a lot of those. What's the outlook for expanding into that area more?
Gosh, it's funny that you say that there's not a lot of them, because I mean, Carrie, Garrett, you can maybe see more into it, but I feel like we get them all the time.
Yeah,
you know,
that's a lot of my backlog and my history of work is actually multifamily and senior living. I've done many of those. It was a pretty large growing market for, I would say, within the last 10 years, quite a bit.
Yeah, I just see that I know a lot of older people right now can't find housing in Fresno.
They're called baby boomers, by the way.
Yes. Yeah, they're all like baby boomers. My parents, and you know, you guys that are younger too, you're going to start seeing your parents looking for stuff like that. But maybe you guys are the only ones that are doing it, because
I've actually helped my grandparents move into some facilities that I've actually built in the past.
Yeah.
So
and what I'm thinking is not so much like assisted living, but like Del Webb's type stuff, where you can live in a 55 and older community.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you guys have a lot coming up then?
We have a few coming up, but it's not like how it used to be like 5 years ago. 5 years ago, we were probably starting or finishing probably like five to 10 of these a year. But it's still coming through. I think that we actually just broke ground on one couple weeks ago up in Ripon. So the market's still there for senior living, but it's definitely starting to get a little bit saturated.
Huh, okay.
So yeah, kind of moving along. We also have found ourselves, and this is one where it's definitely just word of mouth that gets out, but we found ourselves doing a lot of religious projects for you recently. So this one here just is kind of a cool one. This chapel. So this chapel is not a new build. This was a project that was done quite a while ago. I don't remember, I think early 2000s. They wanted it on the other side of their building. So we came in and actually picked this building up and moved it around People's Church to the other side. In place, kind of everything was together. So definitely a unique project. And these kind of are just kind of coming to us at this point. We've got People's, Trinity, and then we're also doing the Well campus in kind of North Clovis right now. And then specialty projects. So I don't think we're ever going to dismiss something outright. So when someone comes to us with a RV park in Mid Pines and wants us to do it and wants us to seriously look at it, we will. And that's what most of these pictures are, is an RV park, and then also some TIs for the Department of Social Services, which this is another one we're kind of repeat client. We do one with them in one of the old Pelco buildings, and I don't know, I get confused by all the numbers that they go because the buildings are out of order, but you followed by the next, and I think we ended up doing 5 or 6 of these buildings. So that is kind of a little bit about who we are, what we do. Anybody got any questions on that? Okay. Then we'll roll into kind of careers at Queering. So I would say, well, first off, internships. We're always hiring interns, looking for people to intern. So I'm not sure on our exact availability right now, but if there's a spot, we're looking to fill it with interns over the summer. Or I know that Jaime worked during the year as well for some of that time. So just kind of looking for opportunities for that. As far as career paths go at Queering, if you're going to go out into the field and be in a job trailer, you're likely going to go kind of one of 2 routes. You're either going to be a project engineer or a field engineer. So the project engineer route will be more kind of working underneath the project manager, handling some more of the submittals, paperwork, the project financials, if you will, kind of that's more focused role there. And then field engineer, you're going to find yourself under the wing of an assistant superintendent or superintendent, and you're going to be more boots on the ground in the field, working on schedule, things like that. What I'll say, kind of the third option here, and is going to be more of a cost engineer, and that would be someone that is in our main office, is working under Garrett and team, and kind of sees their future being more in estimating. So that's estimating is, it's obviously a skill and a talent that not everybody has, and is really just kind of digging in, getting to know the project, and working with all of our trade partners in order to come up with a number that we'll deliver to the client, and then complete the project for. I'll say so that's kind of the base level: project engineer, field engineer, and then kind of cost engineer. Moving up from there, you go to project engineers will go to an assistant PM, field engineers will go to an assistant super, and then cost engineers, I don't know the title, Garrett, but basically a estimator at that point.
I think it's a junior estimator and then an estimator.
Okay, perfect. And then so from there, you can kind of just continue to go up. But as you get to like the estimator or PM level, there's another option as well, which is kind of pre-construction manager. And the pre-construction manager is really going to kind of I'm going to use the word manage way too many times, but they're going to manage a job from when we get it from the owner. So that's someone like Nathan coming to us from Valley Children's and saying like, hey, we're either bidding a job or there's an RFP or something's going on out at Valley Children's and we want querying to be involved. So we'll see it from that stage. And sometimes that stage is we've got a fully designed set of drawings and we want you to put together the number for it. And sometimes that stage is, hey, we know we want a building on this corner and this is roughly what we need it for. And then it's our job to kind of manage all of the design. So for one that we recently completed out at Valley Children's, it was a full design build project. So querying held the contract with Valley Children's. And we, as querying, held the architect's contract. We held the structural engineer's contract. We held the civil engineer's contract. So full design build. And it's really the pre-con manager's job in conjunction with estimating and the kind of field operations to see that project from the nothingness phase, if you will, to, hey, we've got a full set of drawings and hand it off to a project manager. So any questions on kind of what you can expect or looking at anything careers-wise at querying?
So Sam, I just want to make a comment because I think it's just really great that you guys are, and this is related to Garrett's department, is I'm really glad that you guys are focusing in more on cost engineering as like an internship opportunity. I know, and maybe to Garrett and whoever else there. I don't know if you're involved as well, Sam and Carrie, but my 170 class, we actually have a whole cost management section. And the students are like really happy because, I teach them how we do, cost management on an actual job. And so there's been various times where I've had Kiewit come in and talk about it, that they're more heavy civil focused. So Garrett, I may be talking to you about maybe coming in to speak it in that section of class, because when I used to have Kiewit come in, the students would say, oh my gosh, that's exactly what Christy's been teaching us in class. And just understanding the monthly pay application process and kind of how we go from an estimate to a budget. So like Zulima and Jonathan in here are right in that section. So I think, it's a great career field to go into. And so I'm really happy to see that you guys are focusing in on that. I just wanted to mention that to you.
Awesome. It's definitely something that's needed.
Yeah, definitely. Any questions, you guys, especially those of you that are kind of here in my 170 class? Do you have any questions, just about working for querying or curiosities?
What route is Jaime taking?
What's that?
Is Jaime going project engineer or field engineer route?
So Jaime was kind of on the fence a little bit, and I think he is going a field engineer route. But what I'll say too is, especially when you come in as a PE or an FE or whatever role you come into, and I think Jaime is a perfect example of this. He's doing things well outside of, if you were to write down on a piece of paper what a field engineer does, he's doing that plus other stuff. And not because there's not the staffing, but just because he's got the appetite to like, hey, I want to be a field engineer. I want to get my boots on the ground, but you're not going to tell me I'm not going to learn cost too, right? So he's definitely kind of, he's going a field engineer route, but is taking on, I think, a little bit more than that on this project, and the project he's going to kind of allows for that. So.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I would say, nobody like only focuses on like certain tasks only. You as a field engineer will get exposure as a project engineer, and then like as a project engineer you'll get exposure as a field engineer, because they go hand in hand, right? You can't just sit behind a computer and a desk thinking that you know how to run a job without ever setting foot on a field and understanding how the work goes together. So you get, I have my project engineer out there laying out backing, on the job site, because he needs to understand what he needs to give people, in the field. So, and some people find out that they just don't like certain tracks. And then, we try and give them exposure to another area that they might like more, like cost, or some people, guys have expressed more interest in me. I really want to do more estimating and I don't really care much for the field. It's like, okay, well, let's talk to Garrett. Let's talk to Pete, so you don't get pigeonholed anywhere by any means.
No.
I think that's great, Carrie, because I would say between the ages of like say 20, 25, even maybe even 30, really getting that diverse exposure is so important, because you could, start out in something that you really don't like, and go like, well, and then you move. And we see this even with like estimating and scheduling classes, that some students really like estimating and some don't do very well, and they want to do scheduling or they want to do more project management. So I think diversifying your new hires like that is really an awesome way of doing things. And a lot of companies we have come in here do similar things, but I think opening up the cost engineering is like really a good idea. So I think it's great.
I'll tell you, in my career, I've been a field engineer, project engineer, superintendent, and project manager all at the same time. So, you find yourself in a situation where your superintendent decides he wants to move on and you're the only guy on that job. So now you inherited his whole entire career. So you have to adapt. You have to step up and just make it happen. So
that's so true, Carrie. I think I've had all those roles as well. And then I ended up in project control. So I think all of us that are older probably could say that we've been in roles that we didn't anticipate,
Every day. Even Nathan's shaking his head going, yeah, me too. He's part contractor too. You don't even realize it. So, but I will say, if you want to learn more about querying without going into the weeds, we are doing a company presentation at Fresno State, I think on the 13th, as well. I was looking at my schedule earlier. So Garrett.
Of April?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So anyways. Continue, Sam. It's all you.
All right. Awesome. If we don't, and no more questions there, then we can kind of get into the meat and potatoes of what we're going to be talking about, which is site logistics. So just kind of a general overview on logistics and kind of what we use it for. Obviously a logistics plan is going to be a visual representation of what your game plan is for your job site. It's going to be something that can be, and I think that the important part is that it's a coordination tool. It's a coordination tool not to only work internally within your company. So a coordination tool between your superintendent and your project manager, between your project manager and your estimator, to make sure that you're including everything in the estimate that's going to be on that site logistics plan. But it's also a tool that you can coordinate with your trade partners to make sure that kind of the expectations for your job site is conveyed to them as well, so that they know when they show up on day one where their crews are going to have to park, how they're going to get to the job site, even where they can keep their tools, where they can, you can name anything. It should be there's some way, if it's important, it should be shown in your site logistics plan and used to coordinate with your trade partner. And then I'd say the other partner that really benefits from site logistics is ownership. Kind of how we're going to be accessing their job, how we're going to be staging the work. A lot of times, sometimes it's a green field in the middle of nowhere and they could care less. But I find that more often than not, we're up against something else that they own, that they operate, that's important to them to continue to function in the way that it does. And so we need to be able to show with our plan kind of how we're going to mitigate some of those concerns and what our game plan is so that they can buy off on that. And kind of understand what we're going to be doing throughout construction and what it's going to actually look like for them. The other kind of thing, the question that kind of always comes up is when should we put together our logistics plan? Is it kind of once you get onto the job site and you're kind of figuring out how things go? And my answer to when you should do a logistics plan is as soon as you possibly can put together a logistics plan. There's so much that can be communicated through there and picked up as you're going through your estimating process, as you're going through all of these, that the earlier you can put together a logistics plan, the better. Even if it's not a perfect one, having something out there is better than nothing. So with that, we'll kind of keep going. So kind of we talked a little bit about what a site logistics plan is. But what should it cover? So I'm just going to kind of roll through these fairly quickly, and we can talk about some of them in a little bit more in depth or detail. But basically, I mean, a traffic control plan, so how your crews are going to access the site. Pedestrian safety, if you're up against somewhere where you're going to have people walking past. Laydown, so where is all of this material that you guys are bringing in to complete this building going to be put? Site security, so a lot of times this comes in the form of a fence, but sometimes it's site lighting, security guards, cameras, things like that. Want to show all kind of where those are going to be put. Construction offices, so for the general contractor, if any of the trade partners have offices, where are those going? Cranes, this is a critical one, should be a part of every logistics plan. If you're going to have a crane on site, where is it sitting? Along with that personnel lift, if you're in a building that requires one. SWIP, so depending on, sometimes it's really clearly called out in another drawing and isn't needed on there, and sometimes you want to put those on there just to make sure it's picked up. Emergency response plan, so where people are going to evacuate to in the case of an emergency. Building exterior, so if there's any scaffold or swing stages set up, where those are going to be located. Talked about it a little bit, but site lighting. So if you're going to have any security lighting or lighting in the building, around the building, in order to do work, where are you locating those? Kind of moving on, weather protection. So if you're in the middle of, I know this is hard to picture here in California, but if it's raining, you may need some weather protection for your building. And this comes in other forms too. So showing that on there. Deliveries, material stocking. So how the trucks are getting into your job site and maneuvering around. Phasing requirements. So we'll talk more about this one, but as a job gets broken up and cut up and phased, making sure that your logistics plan matches each of those phases. Job site crew parking, so where are the folks parking? These next couple, city ordinances or permit requirements, so if there's any specific rules that you have to follow, being set off the street so far, there's a million of these that could pop up. These are typically some of the harder ones to identify. Waste management plan, so where are your bins being put for all your trash, and how are the trucks getting to them? Temporary utilities, so a lot of times this is power. Are you bringing in a generator? Are you getting power from a pole somewhere? What's your plan for getting power? And then if your building that you're in has a loading dock, where that's located. Signage, so site branding, so making sure that people know where they're going, as well as kind of a lot of times your fence is an awesome opportunity to advertise your company and the work that you're doing. So that's something you want to take advantage of. And then finally, like your gates, where there's a going, and dual gates if required or necessary due to union concerns. So anyway, that's a lot to kind of put on one sheet. I'll kind of walk through a couple of them and highlight some of these items. But really, again, it's all of these go into informing the team what's going to be on the job site.
Hey,
And if
Sam.
there's, yeah,
I just wanted to interrupt you. It looks like we have a guest in here. It looks like a Galaxy phone. So I'm not sure who came in just recently, but maybe you could introduce yourself just so we know who you are because we don't have a name.
That would probably be me if you're saying a Galaxy phone. This is Clint Williams. I'm just listening in.
Oh, hi, Clint.
Yes. Hello there.
How are you? We're good. So
I saw
Clint,
your LinkedIn post the other day, and I thought, I want to listen in myself. So just listening in.
Cool.
oh, that's awesome. So Clint, why don't you tell them where you're from so that they know,
I am from Turner Construction, and your project is very interesting to me because you were right across the street from where we are building. So I've heard a lot about it, and I just thought I would listen in also. So continue on. I don't want to interrupt, but just
Oh,
wanted to listen in and hear also.
Is this considered
we're glad-
spying?
I know.
I'm just kidding.
well, the
Of
thing
course
was
not.
is when he said well, the thing is when he said Clint Williams, I thought, oh, like I better better have him introduce himself so he knows,
No, I would
Yep.
not consider this spying. It is good information. I think it's always good to hear, and especially as it relates to educating Fresno State students. So don't let me interrupt.
Oh,
I just
that's
like to hear.
awesome.
It was interesting to me because your project is right across from the one that we're building. So I know there has been some consistency in what we're doing, and I just thought I would like to hear because number one, I like the building. It's a great looking building, and I don't want to take up your time. So I'm just listening in as a concerned and interested industry citizen. So continue
Oh.
on.
Perfect.
Thank you, Clint. And you know what? We might get you roped into doing these speaker events too. So I'll be calling you.
That is another reason. I do have an idea for something in the future, but we can talk offline.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm glad I stopped you, Sam. Sorry for interrupting. I
No, all good.
actually too have a couple things that I wanted you to explain because I have some students in my 170 class that they're actually doing a logistics plan and they may not know, or have experience on like where to put these things or what's involved. And those two things were the personnel lift, which is, your man lift. Like,
Yep.
when do you use that? Where do you put it? Those kinds of things. And then your SWIP, which for if you guys some of you don't know what that is, that's a stormwater pollution prevention plan. So if you could kind of expand on those in addition to what you were going to say, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm going to just skip a step here and go to a couple of the logistics examples that I was planning on bringing up because one of them does show, there we go. So anyway, logistics can be as in-depth as not in-depth we're always trying to make them look pretty and presentable. But what I'd say is kind of more important is making sure that you get the information that you need onto a sheet of paper so that everybody can look at it. So anyway, I say that only because what I'm going to show here, there's going to be different levels of logistics plans. So here is a hospital that was completed down in Southern California. This was not a querying project. I'll admit I'm pulling from a little bit of a past life here on some other jobs that I've worked on and logistics plans. But it's a 7-story hospital, and there's a requirement, and I haven't dealt with it in so long, I don't remember the exact requirement, but I think it's over 60 feet. Yeah, I'm getting some nods. Over 60 feet, you need a personnel lift or a man lift in order to get your crews to the different floors during construction. So unfortunately, more often than not, the elevators are the last thing that goes into a building, or one of the last things that goes into a building. So having that ability to take not only your personnel, but also material up and down floors is super important. As far as location of it, I'm not sure if there's any like OSHA requirements for location of it, but typically you're going to want to put that somewhere that's not going to be impactful to your construction schedule, that you're not going to have to do a lot of work right at the end of the job in order to close this area up, because basically you can see this kind of blue line here. You're going to have that area open and incomplete until basically you get your elevators running, which again is towards the end of the job. And then at the very end, you're going to have to slap that thing together and close it all up and get your man lift out of there. So in this case here, where this is located, is right at the end of a hallway that runs the full length of this building. So it's really an ideal location for us on this job, because you were able to get up and then go all the way across the second floor without having to make a bunch of turns with your material and do that. So ideal. And then it was basically glazed wall system, so glass in this location. So when we got done with that, we took the man lift out, and closing that up was relatively easy compared to some of the other systems that you could put it in. So I would say when you're looking at where you're going to place that, make sure it's somewhere that makes sense to actually get material to the building, but then also works towards the end. You're not going to be creating a bunch of work for yourself in order to close that section of the building up. So SWIP, you can kind of see a little bit of it here, but I mean, your SWIP plan is going to be put together by an engineer of sorts. So for instance, on the project that I just did, our civil engineer put together the entire SWIP plan, and we simply implemented it. So in this case, we had our rumble strip at our construction entrances. We had straw wattle all the way around the outside in order to keep any debris and runoff. And then we had containment around any of the DIs. There are other things that could pop up, but I'd say probably the more important ones to show on your logistics plan are this rumble strip or the construction entrance. And then maybe if you've got DIs that you want to make sure, and DIs are drainage inlets. So for any of your water coming off the site, make sure that you've got the protection included on those.
The idea behind oh, sorry, Sam. I was gonna say the idea behind SWIP is to try and keep whatever debris, dirt, mud, anything of that sort that's on your job site away from being out to the public side of the project. So anything outside your fence line. So just for those of you who don't know about it.
And I'm just curious, Carrie, Sam, on your jobs that are currently going now with all the weather problems that you've had, have you had to do anything significantly different than you normally do? Or, what's been going on with all the weather out there?
Sarah, you want it?
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, since I'm still in a mud phase.
Yeah.
So we started out with I would say like let's call it one line of rumble strips, and we had large rock. In Bakersfield, they like the rock to try and clean the tires before you drive out. Since then, we've changed to doing more rumble strips further into the project site, so that way more dirt falls off tires. We started out with silt fencing around the border of the project, and we've since kind of started to switch to straw wattles because the wind rips the silt fence apart in this area. And then we've actually have a street sweeper that comes quite often. So we try to keep all of our job site vehicles on the street. We're lucky in the sense where our job site's located where we are in the field in the middle of nowhere right now. But we have a lot of street parking. So we have our trades just offload all their stuff out on the street and not bring any vehicles on site. So that way it minimizes all of our track out. So it just really depends on your areas. With more dirt comes more dust, which you have to water the site. So dry is good, wet is bad, but also dry is bad, wet is good. It just depends on your situations. So
Everything in moderation.
yes, the idea is to keep everything on your site and not out onto the public side. That's the general idea of SWIP. Containment around your oil and spill and fuels, things like that. Just try and keep it clean.
And this is just a side comment, and you guys maybe can pipe in with this. Clint might even have some perspective on this, and as well as querying, but I do project controls consulting and claims mitigation, and all that rain out there. One of the big things that all of you as students should know is that if you are working for a general contractor, I do a lot of oversight of general contractors from the CM standpoint. And one of the biggest things that you can get additional time for on a job is when you have weather delays. It's sometimes harder on other areas, but a lot of times you can not only get weather days, but you can also get dry out days or mud days where they're drying out. And right now out there, the soil conditions are so bad with the hard pan that there's often a lot of dry out days. And so just a suggestion for both of the GCs here on tonight is that you typically can ask for what you need when you need it. And I don't know if that's been your experience, but we try, and especially if we're consulting GCs, to let them know that. So I'd be interested to hear what you guys have to say about that.
I mean, I'm living that right now. So I joked earlier how, I needed a crane to pick up my crane for steel. There's truth to that, because, our mud on our job site, rain where we get like half an inch, we've been so saturated this year that it doesn't seep into the soil anymore. So we're pretty much create this mucky clay kind of composite, like I don't even know what we want to call it at this point, goo, where I can't actually get the equipment around the backside of the job without it getting stuck, right? So in most cases, and I know Nathan's on here, he probably doesn't want to hear it, but a lot of times the contracts say, based on so much rainfall or things, there are side effects. Like it may not be raining, but you literally can't get piece of equipment out in the back without tearing up all of your grading. And now you have to bring somebody in and pay them more money to regrade that area that was ready for another, phase. So it all depends on what your critical path is, right? Is it more important to get something done and then do a little bit of extra work, or is it better to just let it sit and dry? And can you wait on that time? We all want to be based out and paved before winter, but it doesn't do you a lot of good when you start your job in winter, so you kind of have to work around it at times. We can't compact soil because it's too saturated. You won't get your compaction numbers. I mean, in order to do your foundations or, your building pads or anything like that. So it just really depends. So yes, there are times where we have mud days as a result, so definitely.
Yep. And I think it's also important to look at your schedule as a whole. Obviously there's certain jobs, and unfortunately, I know Nathan again doesn't want to hear this, but there's jobs that we got out right now that it's like the whole project is out in the mud right now. It's roadways, it's landscaping jobs, things like that. But when you've got a full-fledged building, making sure that you're remaining productive on your critical path items whenever possible, in order to help offset the effects of some of the rain, and kind of, okay, so you've got a delay in your parking lot, but does that really impact your full critical path schedule? Or are you able to remain productive with your building and complete those tasks? And if So anyway, there's always going to be those times where you're just not able to do anything. But if you can look for those opportunities to continue to complete work in these crazy conditions, if your job site allows, that's what you need to do.
And on the other side of the coin, there is, things that can be caused by being too hot. Us being in the valley, where we get triple digits pretty often. And if you find yourself in trying to do lath and plaster or stucco at that time period, you are now having to water down your walls in between your coats in order to get your pH levels low enough so you can actually finish and paint that surface. So there are two effects that can kind of happen. Wet is bad and too hot is too bad too. So it really depends on what your phase of construction is. So.
Sorry to sidetrack you there, Sam.
No.
We get you back on track now.
We live this every year, right? So like I said, I tell my owners every meeting every week is like, during the winter, construction guys become meteorologists, and we are just so in tune with weather that it's all we have to talk about half the time, so.
No, it's true. We've got one guy in our trailer, Ron, that's his job. He's the weatherman.
Oh, the wrench? Ron the wrench?
Yeah.
Absolutely, he is. So sorry. Good.
I don't even look at my phone anymore. I just ask Ron. All right.
Okay.
So anyway, I just want to kind of go through and show a couple of examples of logistics plans before we really dive into creating one and going through the Valley Children's example that I'm going to go through. So obviously this is a very high level, large project logistics plan. It's not going to call out everything that you're doing within the building, but it does a good job of kind of capturing the main things on the site. For instance, where the tower crane is going to be. In this case, the steel was large enough that it required a crawler crane as well as a tower crane. So kind of the path of travel for the crawler crane, where contractors are parking, where our trailers are going to be, up on a parking garage across the way over here. So it's little things like that it's important for the trade partners to know. It's important for ownership to know that, hey, we're going to be taking up the whole 5th floor of your parking garage. Are you okay with that? And if the answer is yes, then okay. If the answer is no, then we got to find another solution. So it's a good tool to kind of convey some big picture items. And again, this is a plan for, I think this was like a $350 million job. So big project, but they can go and kind of swing the gambit to any level of project. So I'm going to bring up a couple of them here. This is actually my favorite one that I found. This is a logistics plan for a ribbon cutting that we did recently out at the well. So put together, shows all of the important information. So this one is a little bit different. It's not as important where restrooms are at, but logistically, you want to show kind of where people are going to be coming in. How this is delineators with caution tape, so how they're going to be routed to the building, and then just some other kind of miscellaneous caution taped areas or items off, and then where they're storing the material during the cutting. So just kind of a cool example of how you can have a big master plan and then something as small as that. I'm going to skip through a couple of these. There's a bunch of different examples, but this is kind of getting a little bit closer to that healthcare one. So this is at a hospital here in Fresno. So again, kind of picking off some of the major items where the trade's going to be parking. So in this case, it was along the streets. How are you accessing the job? So in this case, it was through a stairwell right here, with material access to the 2nd floor being through right here, and material access here, and then our dumpster out in the job site there. So then there's 1s and 2s are emergency muster points. So this is kind of big picture, and as you can kind of see, it zooms in a little bit, and then you zoom in even more to get to the actual project. And this one, again, inside of a hospital, so we will always set up some sort of containment wall, and whether that's plastic or a pre-manufactured wall or a built wall, something to separate your construction from the hospital. you know, because there's going to be a patient in this room right here. We need to make sure that we're not in any way impacting them with dust, with noise, with smell. Is actually a big thing that you wouldn't really usually think about, but smell in a hospital is something that it gets everywhere. Construction is not a you may not notice it when you're in the job site because you're in a job site, but if you're expecting to be in a hospital and you're expecting everything to be clean, you don't want anything remotely looking like a job site or smelling like a job site getting into your area. So we set up the containment wall, and then to help with the air, we will also set up a negative air machine. And in this case, it was just one individual negative air machine that was kind of feeding this area. But you could put multiple, and the goal of this is just to kind of help contain everything that's within your job site in your job site. So you're going to be pulling air so that there's not anything pushing out from your job site. So positive to this space, if you were in this space and you have positive air pressure, that means that all of the air is pushing out and into some of these areas. With negative air pressure, you're going to be pulling everything in to your job site, which is what you want. You would much rather their stuff get into your job site than your job site get out into their clean environment. So that's kind of a smaller project logistics plan, and then this is the smallest logistics plan I could find. But we were coring 7 holes on this project, and had to show where those were at and kind of how we were containing it. So indicated each location of core and then the containment. And it's putting it on a plan like this, a logistics plan, if you will, makes it really easy for ownership to pick this up. And if I were to tell you that, oh yeah, we had to drill 7 holes and we're going to be kind of over the PACU, which is the post anesthesia care unit, we're going to be kind of over that area. They don't really get the picture. But if you were to send a logistics plan like this to them, they could say, okay, you're setting up containment. That's the blue line. I'm looking at the legend here. So I'm going to be out 1 chair PACU bed, 2 PACU beds, and then a clean utility storage and a dirty utility storage, right? And then ownership can take a look at that and say, they can ask the questions of themselves. Can we live with that? You know, are we going to be okay serving our patient core without the use of these 3 beds and clean utilities and storage and dirty utility? And I'll tell you, in this case, the answer was actually no. And it wasn't because of the beds, but it was because of the clean utility and dirty. They needed this in order to function, and they didn't have the required replacement within this facility. So we actually had to come and do this kind of off hours at night for these 3 so they can continue to use these. But without a kind of logistics plan, it would have been a lot harder to have that communication that got to that answer.
So Sam, I'm actually glad that you're doing some like existing facilities type logistics plans versus just a new building, you know, that's out on an empty piece of land. I do have some students, in fact, one of the students is doing a hospital in my 170 class, you know, and maybe because we don't talk a lot of times when we do logistics plans in classes, it's kind of like new building logistics plans. And so maybe you could talk about some of the kind of the issues the special issues that you have to deal with that you're talking about now, but when you're putting a logistics plan together, and maybe Nathan can also pipe in here and maybe share what it's like from an owner's perspective when you're in an existing building and you're building a logistics plan, and how to coordinate and how important that is for an owner to be a part of that logistics plan. I don't know if those are, if that's clear or not, but.
Yeah, I'll start it off. That I'm glad you brought up Nathan, because he was that was the first kind of person that I was going to go to is ownership. So obviously when you're looking at a logistics plan, and it's funny how often we run into this with our trade partners, with our superintendents, with everybody. You know, you come up with, okay, this is going to be the easiest way to accomplish this work, right? When you're working in an existing hospital, from a construction side, you're like, okay, this is the simplest method to do this. This is how we should do it, right? And what you don't realize is that simplest method for you doing that is putting you above these two rooms that the owner needs. You know, so what I would say is how I typically do it, and hopefully by the time you're putting together a logistics plan that you're going to be coordinating with ownership, there's a little bit of experience on your team from a construction standpoint that you can rely on. Not necessarily going to have to be you the day one, but someone that's potentially worked in something like this before that could kind of poke holes in the easiest option, you know. And then from that point, you come up with, okay, well, what do we think the realistic plan is, right? And then you develop something, and I say that you develop something because I find that a lot of times it's best to put together a plan and present it, and be open to feedback and concerns rather than just going to, in this case, I'm going to say Nathan and Valley Children's and be like, well, Nathan, we got to do these holes, like core these 7 holes. How do you want us to do this? You know, because Nathan's going to be like, well, that's why I hired you, Queering, is to kind of provide that feedback. So we definitely do our best to put our best foot forward and put together a game plan for how we propose doing it, and then try to identify the areas that, like in this one, that we would say like, okay, like this is how long we're going to have to be in this because we know it's sensitive, and this is how long we're going to have to be in this. And then we take that plan to someone like Nathan or Valley Children's or whatever hospital you're working in and start to get their input on it. You know, like, okay, well, Queering, this plan kind of works, or Queering, what were you thinking? We could never do that. Like go back to the drawing board and come up with something new. Or it's kind of like, okay, well, this is close, but you weren't thinking of this, and this that we do in our facility, and you need to take that into account. Nathan, am I off base there? You want to add?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head, and I'll take it a step further in that from the owner's perspective, we've got documentation and compliance that we've got to deal with. So ILSM, which is like an interim life safety measure. So are we blocking fire exits or paths of travel? We've got to get approval through HTI, or formerly OSHPD, as well as the fire marshal. So a lot of these plans we take and we also either modify or use for our documentation and compliance purposes. The other piece of this is infection prevention. So we have to get approval from our infection prevention manager on every infection prevention plan. So she'll want to see this, or he or she will want to see this, and do a site walk and make sure it is consistent with our compliance requirements for infection prevention. And the other thing is joint commission. So every hospital conducts what they call joint commission surveys every couple of years, and you have to document every construction project and make sure all the compliance requirements are being met. So if they come and conduct a survey, which sometimes they don't tell you when you're coming, or maybe they want to see backup on a previous project, you have to show them site logistics plans, ILSM plans, infection prevention plans, which all kind of correlates with the site logistics plan that the contractor does. So just from an owner's perspective, you know, we even take it a little bit step further than the contractor.
And what about the materials and things, you know, like, I'm sure that, you know, maybe out at Valley Children's, maybe there was you know, you put it in rather than an outside office, maybe an inside office, but how do you coordinate getting the materials into these areas where other people are around, you know? Maybe you guys could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a good point. So usually you'll create a path of travel, which I think you've got that in green, right, Sam, on this one? And
Yeah.
typically, we'll create a path of travel out to our laydown area that's typically outside. And then we'll have to document that on a site logistics plan. Typically, depending on the size of the material, it can come through our larger elevators, where we, bring in our gurneys or equipment elevators. If it's larger stuff, everything has to be covered and pushed in with carts. But it really depends on the situation too. With some of the larger equipment, it can get pretty interesting. You got to start taking out walls or, doing it at night or early morning, which, there's several constraints with that as well.
Students, do you guys have any questions or anything? Because this is like really good stuff. Because we don't talk a lot of times we're, creating new logistics plans for new buildings. But this is going to be a lot of what you're hitting out in the industry.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead. So kind of like with your schedule updates and with your cost requests, those are like done on a very routine basis every month. But in terms of like communicating site logistics with the owner, is that mainly on an as needed basis, or is that done on like a monthly basis as well? Or how frequently do you do that?
So I would say that typically you want to set up your logistics plan for your job. And again, it depends on the complexity of the job and whether it's a greenfield site or something like this. But you want to set up your logistics plan that you're going to do everything you possibly can to make sure that you're falling within that logistics plan for the duration of the job early. Beginning of the job, set the expectations, like this is what we're doing. And even if it's a phased project, so you've got 5 phases, say, hey, here's the 5 phases and here's the logistics of how we're going to do each phase so that the owner can start to see that. And then as far as updating, if there's a major update to any logistics plan beyond just like, hey, we're gonna move this containment from this side over here, but we're still accomplishing pretty much the same thing. If it's something small, you can probably make that adjustment, but anything that's going to be major, you want to make sure that you're updating your logistics plan and getting it to ownership. So it's kind of on an as needed basis, which as needed could be like once a week. It could be once a project, so that, and then I will also say that we try our best to get updates on logistics and provide updates on logistics at our owners meetings. So we talk about any changes to logistics on the job site. And then also typically we'll ask ownership like, okay, hey, are we accomplishing our logistics plan? Is there anything on the job site that needs to be modified that you've heard from? And it's honestly 90% of the time it's not Nathan that is there looking at our job site and calling us out. It's someone that's using this facility as like, for in this instance, it's some nurse working in the PACU that sees something that tells someone that then gets to Nathan that comes to us. So we like to, as much as possible, kind of reach out and get feedback as well if there's things coming up like that. So I don't know if that was kind of a long roundabout answer to the question, but as things change, make sure that ownership knows about them.
Cool. Thank you. Good summary.
Good call. And I'll even call out that sometimes the owners make changes too to the contractor. Like take for instance, this winter we had high RSV rates at our children's hospital. So we changed logistics. We've shut certain things down where we didn't do construction for a while during the winter months until things or our census, which is our census is basically our patient volume calms down. So it's not always the contractor that makes changes. It's a lot of times it can be the owner as well. Another great example is an outside project in the front of our hospital, the Phase 5 landscape. We're finding ways to be less impactful to the hospital In those situations, we may circle back on a couple phases and find a better way or a better opportunity. And then we'll get with our stakeholders within that area or our leadership just to make sure they're on board. But like Sam said, it really is a case-by-case basis.
And Sam, maybe you could talk a little bit too about how do you coordinate, you're coordinating with the owner, but you also have to coordinate with your subcontractors. Do you usually bring your subcontractors in those meetings with the owner, or is it kind of like a pass-through situation with the communication?
I'd say most of the times, honestly, unless it's large scale coordination that's going to require, I'm thinking specifically like MEP. A lot of times they're very specialized trades, and unless it's really going to require their input, I'd say a lot of the times we try to coordinate with owner and kind of have that be us be the conduit between our trade partners and ownership, kind of in both directions, right? Like our logistics plan doesn't just get built by Queering. It's all of our trade partners that have input, and that we reach out to for input if we're not sure on something, and then try to work to compile that plan and then make that presentation to Children's. But if there is like a large, I know in the past I've done electrical shutdowns in hospitals. Those logistics plans, typically you've got your electrician and your electrical engineer right there with you talking to ownership. So it's specialty ones like that, you'll want to make sure that they're involved. But other than that, you try your best to kind of be that conduit between the two.
Yeah, like coordination of that magnitude requires a lot of facilities input and things like that to make sure that all the like emergency service systems are on board. A lot of these jobs, like it's not necessarily clear on this drawing that Sam's got up here, but there's boundaries that we're bound by in some of these remodel projects. So we're not allowed to go beyond certain areas. So our scope of work is very detailed, and I still call them OSHPOD, but OSHPOD makes sure that we stay within that. Those areas. Yep. I've actually done work in the hospital at Valley Children's, when we were doing oncology remodel, and, there are things that you don't realize that impact other wings of the hospital until you get that phone call that says you have to stop. We were doing some anchor drilling for some steel that we had to do for some pathways for a new pathway to the roof, and they happened to have surgery going on, not next to us, but on another wing, but they could feel a little bit of vibration. So we shut down, so your logistics can constantly change just based on the needs out there.
And you can certainly tell by just some of these conversations, especially the students that are listening, that there's a reason why Queering, they value their client, their client reputation, or their reputation, or with their relationship with their clients, because this kind of coordination is very important with an owner in making sure it's done right, so if you see that they have this, a high percentage of repeat clientele, it's because they're able to work in that relationship and coordinate not only the technology, but also the people.
Yeah. And I would say kind of adding on to that is typically, we get all sorts of different clients. Your hospital clients are going to be some of the most knowledgeable people that you work with. And a lot of times they'll be asking you questions that you're kind of thinking like, oh, well, I didn't even think of that, like you're going into these meetings and they've got the knowledge base there, and especially of their facility. They're not sometimes we get clients where they don't know anything about construction or how to build or how to manage a facility. You're not going to run across those people managing hospitals. So, all right. Well, Christy, I'm gonna get into a little bit of the kind of phase, this we're calling phase 4 logistics, and this is just more around the hospital, and maybe dive a little bit into some of the Bluebeam stuff if we're we're ready for that? Again, I
Sure.
think a lot of
Uh-huh.
it will still be hospital coordination. So keep those questions coming, but, so this one here, and let me take a step back and go to the kind of picture of how this one ended up. So this is Valley Children's, we're calling it Landscape Phase 4, but it essentially is the playground, or the main playground in the back of the hospital. So it's a really cool space. It was a nice outdoor space before, but I think this is the kind of finished product, and it's an awesome space for not only the patients in the building, but also their friends and their brothers and sisters who have been in the hospital with them every step of the way to kind of get some outdoor time. There's a kind of water fountain over here. There's a play structure. There's swings on this side, mini golf. These are all really cool instruments. If you're ever in the back of Valley Children's Hospital, like, just go mess with some of these. They're pretty cool. There's one here in the ground where you like step on it and it makes a bunch of noises. It's a really cool space for the patients and the people there to support them to kind of have an outdoor space. But that being said, it is pressed right up against their hospital, right? So you've got a physical therapy room right here that exits right out to here. You've got patients in all of these rooms here, kind of looking down on the job. We're right outside their windows. And I'd say kind of the most important part, and the reason why we are going to go through this phasing that we're going to go through, is these doors right here. This one, this one, this one, and this one. So these two doors are an exit from their first floor corridor. So, and again, Nathan was talking a little bit about ILSMs. So anytime you modify how you're going to be exiting a building, you need to put together an ILSM plan, or an interim life safety measure plan, and kind of present that to HCI, the fire life safety officer for HCI, and get them to buy off on your game plan. So we needed to get them to buy off on us just using one of these doors at a time instead of both. And then the same thing with the stairwell. So there's a door right here and a door right here that the stairwell goes kind of all the way up to the third floor. So in the case of an emergency, typically someone on the third floor would come over here to the stair and come down the stair and out this door. But since we got a construction project that we got to do in here, we had to figure out a way to kind of reroute them. So within the hospital, and this was something that Nathan's team really handled, and I think actually, Nathan, you probably, it was either you or Scott, did this one, where in the hospital, there was a bunch of signage that rerouted them away from this stairwell while we were doing the work here, and kind of rerouted them either to this stairwell or to an alternate exit. So there's a lot of work as we were going through this phasing that we wanted to limit the amount that was impacted from these four doors. So our game plan for that, and I'll kind of switch to the logistics here, and this is the kind of final state logistics, is we would have all of this work in here completed, and then they would be able to exit out this way to here. So all four of these doors are open. But obviously we couldn't do that right off the bat because there was work to be done in there. So what we did is we created, this is kind of like our final state logistics plan. And then we created these interim logistics plans. So we called this one phase 1, which is temporary exiting. So here we kept the left side open. So the yellow indicates open. We kept this left side open. And then we did all of this concrete work in here and then out this way to get to an existing concrete path. So this was like a couple weeks of work. And this is another thing with these logistics plans. Typically when you're phasing them like this, that's going to be important to Nathan and his team and ownership is duration. How long is this work going to take? How long are we going to be in this setup so that they can convey that to their stakeholders as well as HCI and team. So this was kind of the first step. And then the second phase was this area was all completed. And we just needed to complete this area. So at this time, we took the whole project over, but really just focused on finishing out this area so that they could get back to their normal egress plan. So again, this one was shorter, so it was a week and a half. So we put that, and then the kind of last one was back to normal. Everything is complete and everybody's exiting out that way, and we're back to our initial phasing plan, which was this one right here. So any questions on kind of phasing? I'm going to get into a little bit of Bluebeam and how we go about building some of these and some of the things that I did on that one that kind of help convey logistically what's going on.
Matt had a question here. He said, or he asked, what was the name of the plan that shows a door will be temporary closed? And I don't know, Nathan, is that the answer there? ILSM or interim life safety measures plan?
Yeah, that's correct. And at some point, OSHPD or HCI changed it to construction safety plan, but Joint Commission still calls it an ILSM, so that's what we typically call it. Fun part of having to deal with a lot of different government agencies and other things, but basically it's an ILSM.
Every
Yep, and
agency
that
has its own acronym too, so you get to learn them pretty
Right.
fast.
Exactly.
I think every
And
kind
then-
of construction projects has their own acronyms.
No, I'm with you. And everybody has their own different ones sometimes too. It really throws you off. But yeah, that plan is basically they take this plan, Matt, and kind of add to it, and it's really to get the buy-off from the fire life safety officer that this plan is okay and patients are still going to be safe during this. Is basically the gist of what they're trying to get to.
Cool, thanks, guys.
And on top of that, you
Few of
also
those,
get approval through
situations
the
come up.
fire marshal too. Sorry. So it
Oh,
also
sorry,
goes
Nathan, go
to
ahead.
Sorry, it also goes to the fire marshal for Madera County. You really need both sign off on the site logistics plan or
Oh, that's
ILSM.
interesting.
Yeah, so that's again just one of the beauties of HCI work is that you've got HCI, which is basically managing the inspection and building of the hospital. And then you've also still got the County of Madera that has to be responsible for these, because the County of Madera is the one that's going to be rolling trucks if there's a fire. The County of Madera is going to be the one kind of responding to emergencies, and HCI's role is just to make sure that kind of patients are safe during the construction.
Right.
So let's get into kind of some of the fun stuff. So logistics wise, always try to kind of look for a plan that covers the whole project or as much of the project as you want to focus on. So for this one, I took a plan from the drawings and cut out all of the other information. So all of these keynotes were called out down here. Don't really need those. So you just use the cut content tool to cut all of that out. In this scenario, it's already all been done. But that's kind of what you do to clean this up so that you're not having a logistics plan that has too much information on it. Because you really don't care about all the rest of the stuff. You just want the new stuff or the logistics that you're going to be focusing on. So coming into here, so the first thing that I'm going to do is draw the fence that I wanted. And on a logistics plan, you could just use your markup tools up here to draw a fence, and it would convey all the information that you need to convey. right? I'm just gonna kind of quickly draw it. You can change the settings on all of it so that it's not just a black line over a black line, but maybe a green line. We'll make the width greater and then go through kind of just some of the, oh, Ray, you are speaking my language, man. Sorry, I got distracted. You got, so the fence line here, and you could just use the normal markup tool. And it does all the information and conveys everything you need to. But what I find is usually more useful is if you can use a scaled markup, you just get some more data into this logistics plan that could be useful somewhere down the road. I'm not saying that it's immediately going to be useful, but like for fence line, if say you're a project engineer or you're a field engineer putting together your logistics plan, and your superintendent comes over and is like, hey, I got to order fence. How much fence do I got? You know, it'd be way more useful if you could just go and click on this line and figure out how long it is rather than doing a new takeoff every time they ask for something. So in this case, I'm going to scale the drawing, and hopefully you guys are all, being part of the Bluebeam user group, I'm taking it that you guys are all somewhat versed on Bluebeam. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. Stop me if you've got any questions, but scaling the drawing, I want a custom scale, 1 foot equals, or 1 inch equals 10 foot. And then I'm going to go through and draw my fence. Right, and I'm not going to draw it the same way that my logistics plan had it, but it's a useful tool to use. And then, you know, instead of just having a green line, you know, okay, I've actually got 290 feet of fence, you know, and you can pass that information along to either your superintendent or to Garrett in estimating and say, hey, make sure we're including 290 feet of fence through the duration of construction. So that's one kind of useful tip or trick when building out these logistics plans. The other one that I like to use, and you could kind of see it on the site logistics, and I'll actually do a little bit cleaner version of it, is I'm doing this logistics plan here over a demo drawing, right? And I want to start to put in some of the new work that we're doing. And rather than just doing like a square, I kind of want to make it look a little bit more professional and just a little bit cleaner than that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the new drawing where we've got some of that stuff. I'm going to take a snapshot. I'm just going to use the shortcut G to take a snapshot. And I'm going to actually cut the section that we're going to be completing. I'll just kind of go, again, this is just rough. If you were actually doing this, I would recommend taking the time to be precise in what you're doing, because a lot of times the precision can make all the difference when you're talking with owners, because you may think that something's obvious and clear, but when they're just looking at the lines that you drew and the line is drawn somewhere slightly different than it should be, it can cause a question, and that's just more conversations and communications that has to happen down the road. So I say be precise, but I'm going to go quick here and not be as precise.
I'll also chime in on that being precise when you're probably doing this snapshot overlay. That's what I think Sam's going to do. It'll also tell you that if you have a bust in some of your scale and dimensions too, potentially. So when you line up your corners and you see that things don't overlay correctly, then you could find yourself talking to your architect to figure out where their bust is. Some of that. Yep.
Agreed, Gary. So anyway, I'll take this and I'll just kind of throw it on there. And then you're going to see that it's going to very quickly get hidden. I say very quickly. Sometimes these things, as you're moving them, take a little bit. So give it a second. Oh joy. All right. So it's sitting there now, and it's really difficult to see. So another tool that I use quite often is the change color. So if you right click on whatever you just snapshotted and go to change color, and then you can modify the color. So I'm going to change the source color from a black to a red. Then just you can go through and it's picking out all the different colors within that, and you can change all of them to your red or whatever color you want. But in this case, I'm just going to use red pretty much across the board. So now you've got the actual footprint of what you wanted put into your logistics plan. And then just to clean it up a little bit further, you can cut the content underneath it. So you don't need to do anything, as long as your markup isn't flattened, you don't need to do anything with the actual markup that you just put there. You can just cut out, and this will cut what's underneath it. There we go. Now it's a kind of clean cut and information and data on there for the logistics plan. So anyway, that's kind of I find that I use that quite often when putting together logistics plan, because more often than not, you're getting from some sort of demo, especially within the hospital, to a new state, and you've got both of those drawings, so you might as well use them and overlay them, specifically the sections that you need on top of each other. So legend creation, you can create your own legend and label everything as you want to, or you can make sure that everything is properly labeled in here. So you can click on the item that you want, and then instead of the subject being snapshot, you could have install concrete, right? So that's the subject for that. And then this one here, the fence, is not going to be a 6-inch vertical curb. It's going to be fence. And I'm just going to change the label as well to fence. And then select everything that's, and ideally in a full logistics plan, this would be more than just 2 items, but you can do both, and then just use the legends tool down here and do create new legend. And then select where you want that. And now you've got a legend. And if you want to change what's shown here, because I really don't care about the quantity or the unit, you can do that in the settings by going to edit columns and then just taking off the unit and quantity and just keeping the description. And then now you've got a pretty easy to build legend for your site logistics plan. And then the last one I'll say, if you guys haven't gotten into tool chests, I would recommend taking some time to mess around with these ones, as well as add some from the Bluebeam website as well. So for the first one, I'll just go door symbols. Like, you could spend forever building a door, or you could just download the double door symbol from Bluebeam and throw that in there, and now you got yourself a nice pretty gate in your fence. Right, and you can change colors on it, so it's not black but green. Oh, now it just looks like part of your fence. And then I think I've still got it open. Let me see here. Oops.
Which with the tool chest, there's a lot of different toolboxes you can download from Bluebeam's website. There's architectural, electrical, mechanical, yeah, punch list, all kinds of different ones.
So, and then the last one, and I think a lot of people possibly know about this, but maybe not everybody, but the draw to scale tools up here. So your orange tools up in the corner. This is really kind of a useful tool. Again, as much as you can get to scale on these drawings, the best or the better. So I've already scaled the drawing, so the sheet recognizes the scale. So I can just go click on any of these tools. I'm going to use the rectangle one, and say that I did have like a Connex or a job storage bin out here, and it's a 20-foot wide. I'm going to go 20 foot and then tab over, and the height is going to be 8 foot. And then it's going to be 0 rotation. So you can do that. And now you've got a box that's 20 foot by 8 foot. And you can do that with the other tools as well. So when you're drawing in, and I mean, on all of these logistics plans that you've seen, kind of some of the ones that we were initially kind of clicking through, like it's great to have, let me get to one, but it's great to have like your rumble strip shown, but how big is your rumble strip actually? You know, try to put as much detail as you can into your logistics sizing wise to show what it's actually going to be. Because the boxes are good and it's a good information relay, but if you can actually get it sized right, you're just going to be better off. And it's going to look right.
Just make sure your page scale is correct. That's the biggest thing when you set it. Some designers tend to have different snapshots or different things on their pages that might be at different scales. So just be mindful of that. I have run across that in the past.
Yep. I would recommend, even if you do set your scale like I did off of the scale bar on the right side, find something on the drawings that you know the size of. A lot of times I use a door, because most doors I know are either 3 foot or 4 foot. And I'll scale a door and make sure that the scale on the sheet is right. Or if you've got a actual scale on the drawing, use that instead. Like a dimension, I'm sorry.
It never hurts to double check. I do it every time I set a scale just to make sure. So.
Yep.
Sam, I had a curiosity, like, and I've always called OshPod, but maybe you could explain why we're switching from OshPod to that. And I can't remember what Nathan called it. ACAI, HCAI. It's called HCAI. Yeah. So maybe why'd they make that switch? And then when you're doing the logistics plan, is there anything specifically related to these kinds of projects that you have to have on the logistics plan?
So first question is, there was a long spiel about why they changed what they to what they are now. It's basically the goal is, I think, to kind of expand a little bit of what OshPod is. So OshPod was Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development. So it's an office under the California government. HCAI actually, so HCAI is the Department of Healthcare Access and Information. So it is in the California hierarchy, a department is slightly larger than an office. So they've kind of expanded their purview a little bit and started to also look at other items. So as far as construction goes, though, Christy, it is essentially the same that we're going through. They've just been kind of incorporated into a larger, or kind of created a larger department to also look at other items as well. And I say that nothing has really changed. They are struggling a little bit right now because pretty much all of their code references reference an OshPod.
Yeah.
And they are no longer OshPod, so they're going through some growing pains. And I'm sure, Nathan, you see this, but it seems like they're constantly fighting the HCAI versus OshPod right now.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think there's even rumors that they're going to go back to OshPod. So we'll see
interesting.
what happens. Wouldn't hurt my feelings
I would just
at all.
just to err on the side of caution, and I do it almost every time, I say HCI or OSHPOD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sam, I just wanted to let you know, it's about 10 minutes to 9, your Pacific Standard Time, just so that you know and can wind things down a little bit.
No, I don't really have too much else to cover. I will talk a little bit about the question that you asked on making sure specific things are covered for OSHPOD or HCI. I don't, obviously, like, and it's really kind of more so on the inside of the hospital, but they're really going to kind of care about things that impact hospital or patient care. So making sure that we're contained from the hospital and how we're doing that is important to show on these logistics plans. This one is kind of a little bit more simple one because our containment is the doors, you know. So on this one, we wanted to highlight, and I think we did highlight, where we're actually shutting off and impacting the facility. So like, this door is closed, this door is closed, this door is closed. And then Nathan's team, I think, actually took it a step further, and they took one from the inside of the hospital and put together that plan saying, okay, well, this door is closed, so we're also going to either close another door so that nobody can get to this and it be just like a dead end, or we're rerouting to this area or this area. So it's, I would say, Christy, that there's no like hard set rule of, yes, you need to make sure you have this included in a drawing, but you do want to be a little bit more cognizant of making sure that you're putting everything that could impact the facility onto that logistics plan. Because the last thing that you want is for you to somehow do something that impacts the facility, and either the facility to say, or for HCI to say, oh, well, you never even told us about that, you know, or you never had a plan for how you were going to address that. So get as much as you can onto that drawing that's going to impact the facility.
And Sam, I'm not sure if you would know this question, but maybe Clint might actually know this question if Queering doesn't know, but how is like OSHPOD different than saying doing biopharmaceutical, or, you know, some of their clean room type stuff that you're going to be doing in the city? Or are they kind of similar in terms of just the requirements?
So we've done pharmacies before. I'm not sure if there's a difference between like biopharmaceuticals and pharmacies within a healthcare facility.
And Clint, have you guys done any of that? I don't know if you can answer or not. I know you texted some stuff in the chat.
I will allow, well, let me just say that when it comes to pharmacies or biopharmaceutical or anything, it just depends on if it's under the jurisdiction of HCI. So
I see.
HCI is, they won't allow you to put anything in unless there is a picture, an approved drawing by HCI. So it's pretty simple as that. It's different than most construction projects, which I'm sure Queering does quite a bit of. So they're familiar with HCI just like we are. So I don't want to take their presentation, but it's just HCI is a different animal, because you can't put something in place unless there's an approved detail or approved drawing that has been approved by them.
Well, there's also,
And so some
sorry.
biopharmaceutical and clean room will be regulated by HCI.
not necessarily. It could be,
Okay.
you know, it depends on like what's being made at that area or that pharmacy or something of that, or what's being mixed, right? So
Probably also depends on the overall use of that building that it's going to be in as well, because HCI really only has jurisdiction over buildings, and I'm pretty sure on this, really only has jurisdiction over buildings where patients are being cared for.
I see. I just asked the question because we don't get a lot of that, in the Central Valley, but you go, into Silicon Valley and there's a lot of projects that are biopharmaceutical and clean room, things like that. So I've heard they're somewhat similar, so.
Yeah, no, but
I
I'm
bet there's some,
completely,
yeah. Sorry. go
I'm
for it, Sam.
completely with Clint. The challenge of working with HCI is you need to have a drawing for every single little thing that you do, and getting the drawing is not always the challenge. It is getting HCI to buy off on the drawing before you do the work that is the challenge. Because in a typical construction job, you run across a structural issue out in the field and you write an RFI, your architect looks at it, your structural engineer addresses it, gets it back to you, and you can proceed with the work. In an HCI building, if it's deemed materially altering, which is a fun phrase that you spend a long time arguing over if you're ever in one of these buildings, if it's deemed materially altering, then you have to get OSHPD to basically sign off on your drawing before you can build anything. And sometimes that takes weeks, if not longer, to get that. So your schedule may all of a sudden be dependent on this one RFI that you wrote that is taking weeks to not get the answer, but get the answer approved by OSHPD, HCI.
And so does your your submittals, your procurement have to be approved by HCI or OSHPD as well on these types of projects?
Specific items do, not all.
Okay.
Most of the time, you're already using from a list of pre-approved equipment and materials. I think they're called OPMs, if I remember right, where they're attested in a lab system that you can use this isolator spring with this bracket, with this mechanical unit. It's been tested on a shake plate and everything like that. And that is your AC unit, period. You can use that approved system. If you deviate beyond that, then you have to prove through testing that it meets those requirements and you have to get OSHPD to sign off on it. So a lot of times there's already things that you have no choice but to use. So you're pre-approving materials. Yeah, I think that's called OPM if I remember right. It's been a while since I've done OSHPD.
I'll just make a comment too about just these kinds of projects. Because in project controls, I get a lot of different types of projects, but I would say contractors that work on hospital jobs or this is for the students. So sometimes Clearing's very specialized in this area. They're, have good client relations. And so they do a lot of this work. And so, another company may be good at doing courthouses and jails, and they do a lot of that. So you're going to see a lot of that, and every kind of sector has its own lingo and its own language and its own specialization and requirements as well. And maybe Sam, you could share on that, or Carrie as well.
Yeah,
I know school's another one. Was it?
Yeah,
DSA?
school's another one.
Yeah, that's definitely.
No, especially. I come from hospitals, and I've worked in hospitals pretty much my entire career, and I've just recently done a job that was not under the purview of HCI or OSHPD, and it's amazing the difference in and where I saw it was just the inspection level. In an HCI facility, you're going to have your I's dotted and your T's crossed at every step of the way because you're being continually inspected. Whereas you do go work for the county and their inspector comes out every couple of weeks and says, yeah, you guys look good, and moves on. And I'd say that's probably the biggest difference between Clint's job and the job that we did across the street from him is he's under HCI and we're under County of Madera. And it's night and day, the difference between those two.
Yeah,
So for an
we're,
HCI project, the
we're
owner-
still under construction, and you guys are done.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's how stringent it is, huh?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Every piece of their building, I'm sure, has been looked at
Wow.
And we,
Yes.
as the
Well-
owner for H-type projects, have an IRR that's contracted with us direct. Like Sam said, and Clint said, yeah, you get inspected pretty much daily on most of the projects. So,
And students, Nathan's talking about an IOR, that's an inspector of record. If you don't know that acronym, they might not know, Nathan.
Which
Sure,
there's
yeah,
somebody that's
sorry.
on full time on the job site
Right.
inspecting everything. They're not just somebody that you call out to inspect. They are there all the time watching. And then you have an area compliance officer that oversees that IOR's inspections as well. So you have an inspector that's inspecting the inspectors. So remember that. So yeah. I
Well,
thought they
I
were
wanted
called, IORs are known for what? Instigators of rework. Somebody told me that. I was like, I never heard that before until recently, but I can understand that. So
Oh, that's funny. Well, I just want to get back to Sam. Sam, this has been just very informative. I know for myself as well. I haven't done a lot of hospital work, but I teaching on this side, you hear more and more about it, and so I learn more and more. I've done a lot of other different types of jobs, so I myself have learned so much from this session, and maybe the students can pipe into and share, maybe some of the takeaways that they're going to take away from this, because it's been very informative.
Yeah, Sam, I'm glad you came. I remember watching you do another talk on site logistics, like it was probably over a year ago now, but I think that was one of my first bug meetings too. So it was glad to kind of see it come back and be able to know a little more and take away a little more.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Anyone else?
I'm gonna try to implement this snapshot feature. I really like that that whole thing.
It's cool, isn't it? That's one of my go-tos.
I use it almost daily myself. Yeah.
Yeah, I
huge.
kind of wish I
Great.
knew about it sooner because it looks amazing. I don't know.
It's a great way
Yeah.
to send information into emails really quick too on very specific details to people. So yeah.
Great, guys. Anyone else want to pipe in before we wrap things up here?
Thanks, Sam, for all the great information. Even though I was late, I was driving back from Fresno. But
Yeah.
if you offer
Yeah.
classes outside of work, let me know.
Yeah, I will do, Ray. And hey, no worries for you being late. Just like United, you're just a little bit behind. It's no problem.
I don't know if Sam gets outside of work. I don't know if you guys could tell, but he's actually in the office right now doing this. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I can tell exactly where he's sitting too. I think my desk is on the other side.
We really appreciate you, Sam.
Yeah.
And
no,
yeah, and I also wanted to thank Clint for coming. Thank you, Clint, and Nathan. Thank you for taking
Yeah.
the time with us and answering some of our questions. We don't usually get any, owners coming in, and so it's been very helpful. This has been very fruitful. I feel like this is like construction talk radio.
Yeah,
No
it
problem.
really is. So let me just add one final comment. First of all, thanks to the Querying guys for letting me listen in. My intent was to kind of hear a little bit about, maybe I missed it because I joined late, about the Founders Plaza building out at the entrance to Valley Children's. I do like the building. I think it's very striking. It's a good looking building. But I don't want you guys to think that I was spying, but I know we have done these also. And I encourage other GCs locally, even when we do them, I have by all means listen in and just hear about how we are all doing certain things on our projects. I think we've done 2 or 3 of these with Michael, haven't we, Christy? I think.
Yes,
When,
Devon Schrar, yes.
yeah,
And-
so we've shared before, and I'm always open to other GCs and also students to definitely, by all means, listen to what we all have to share. So no attempted spying, just trying to, hear a little bit more and find out about what others are doing on their projects also.
Well, thanks,
Awesome.
Clint. And I might be calling you next week because we need another speaker. So maybe I'll plant that seed.
I think he just volunteered himself and he didn't
I
realize.
know, I was like, well, I might be following up on that.
I have some ideas, so no problem if we need to talk offline.
Okay, sounds good. But really, thanks you guys. Querying, you're always, I mean, all of you guys at Querying have always been such great partners with us, and we really appreciate you. And we know it takes time and effort to do this, and it's just a great way of you guys, you know, volunteering and being of service to not only the bug, but our department. So we thank you very much.
Yeah, happy to do it. It's great to share kind of what we're doing. We're all excited about it. So if Ray doesn't get that off his screen though, I'm not coming back. No, it's great to be here, and thank you guys all for your participation. It's good to see all the faces, and the interactiveness of it is great as well. So
Absolutely.
Great.
nice that I'm
Well,
not sitting here talking for 2 hours.
yeah, and if for those students that came in late, Querying's going to be doing a meet and greet. I think, what was it, April 11th?
I think the 13th.
13th, but keep an
Yeah.
eye out for that. But they're going to do a recruiting session. So, you know, if
Yeah.
you're interested in going to work with Querying, please go to that. Or, you know, if you're a group lead here for Bug, you can always contact Carrie or Garrett or Sam.
For sure.
Well, thanks you guys.
Awesome.
We really appreciate all of you coming tonight, and I'll stick around here if anybody has any questions or has any comments or anything. But otherwise, I hope everybody has a great evening. We have spring break next week. That doesn't mean that I'm off necessarily, but
Or any of
students
us.
are off. So enjoy your time, you guys. If I don't see you and gals, have a great spring break, and we'll wrap things up here. So thanks everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for your
Everybody.
time.
Thanks again, Sam. Way to go. Thank you. Thanks for joining, Nathan. All right. Okay. All right. Well.